Nirvana. Again, just a quick interesting story about that is what I wrote as a Bhishma Nirvana, like a 200, 300 page book, is actually there in 3 pages of my first book, which has got about 300 pages with references, everything. So why did I write that? Just like I'm going to tell you this story of Arundhati and Vasishtha that took me 15 years of research. It's just as a coincidence, Newton also had his theory of gravity ready. Number of you might have studied this. But after almost being everything ready, then it took him 15 years before he came out. Do you know why? The answer is moon. His theory could work perfectly fine for everything else, but moon was not yielding to his theory of gravity. Okay? In fact, the Newton's theory of gravity could come because of, again we talked the first part, because of a significant scientific and mathematical contributions of Indians. That knowledge came with Jesuit priests first came to France and from France to England. Before that, that was just not possible. Now, that's not to take credit away from Newton. Newton actually did not understand it properly. But you know, sometimes you make the mistake twice and therefore you might get the correct answer. It's kind of like that. Okay, now if you have heard the name Professor C.K. Raju, you may read that. But back to our subject. So that Bhishma Nirvana, it is such a powerful evidence, we are talking of evidence, but I realized, not ordinary reader, that was perfectly understandable, but like say in Mahabharata space, there are 100, 200 Mahabharata researchers, and they were not getting it. And it was such a thing, like if you understand it, it should give you goosebumps. And it's not about Nilesh figured it out. In fact, I tell people, take my PowerPoint presentation, go to the first page, change the name from Nilesh to your name, and start talking about it. It's not about who figured it out. I figured it out meaning what? I decoded what Vyasadeva has written in the Mahabharata, like different references. I solved the jigsaw puzzle. I did not build the puzzle. Okay? You can take that puzzle and explain it. So that's the third book, by the way. Back to the Arundhati Vasishtha. So Vyasadeva is saying to Dhritarashtra that, my dear king, that Arundhati, who is always otherwise walking behind Vasishtha, is walking right now at the time of Mahabharat war, is walking ahead of Vasishtha. Now why this is a big deal? Why this is a tough unsolved problem that science likes or science loves? Now when I read in this University of Alberta around 1995, my astronomy knowledge was not that good, but it was decent. I mean, I was always interested in it. And immediately that's something very clear. I knew where Arundhati is, just like every one of you know, most of you know Panhandle. And so I said, okay, let's understand what is ahead and what is behind. And in astronomy, you know, I understand. Now when I started reading what other Mahabharata researchers have done, I went back to at least the older generation would know these names. Lokmanya Tilak, okay, then some of you know Pava Kane, Bharat Ratna P.V. Kane, okay, Bharatacharya C.V. Vaidya, Lokmanya Tilak, S.B. Dikshit, great astronomer. They all have tried to solve this and they couldn't solve it. Another name, I consider also him as my guru. I mean, he passed away 2-3 years ago, Dr. P.V. Vartak. He tried to solve it in 3 different ways, couldn't solve it. And I said, you know, that's why it should be so simple. Actually, I also thought, like with my engineering, just newly master's degree is going to come in just few days. I also thought, like for a master's in chemical engineering, this must be a weekend business. And then it took me 15 years. Okay? But when I finally figured it out, this is what I figured it out. That from our times, if you go at night and look at the Arundhati Vasishtha, maybe if you have a good eyesight, great. If you don't, binocular will help. You will see that Vasishtha is ahead of Arundhati, okay? So Arundhati Vasishtha, they will rise in the northeast, and that's the north pole there. So northeast, and they will go like this and then set on the northwest, right? But Vasishtha will be always ahead. If you go back 1,000 years, still Vasishtha is ahead. 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, still Vasishtha is ahead if you go back this. But then a time comes, a certain time interval of few thousand years, going beyond that 6,500 years, where you will see Arundhati going ahead of Vasishtha. And you know what? Until I figured it out, all these great astronomers, both in the west and the east, do you know what they were saying about this Arundhati Vasishtha observation? Like, even in India, like say C.V. Vaidya or Pava Kane, P.V. Kane, Bharat Ratna Kane, You know what they said? This is impossible in the very order of nature, astronomy speak. Okay? Impossible. And do you know how the Western astronomers or Western Indologists used it? They say, look at these Indians, look at these Hindus. They write all kinds of crazy stuff which is simply not possible. And now remember Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvakam. So I started with that Shraddha. Shraddha is very important. The conviction, the trust, reverence is important. I said, why would Vyasa write something like this? I mean, what fun he's going to get out of this? So when I worked, long story short, fast forward 15 years, and then when I did it, I found that there is actually a time period. I'll not go into the technical details, That's when you need to get my book, When Did the Mahabharat War Happen, if you want to know the technical details. By the way, it works better than Rigveda at the bedtime. If you start reading it, you'll get a good night's sleep. Okay, and one day you will figure it out, something like this. Now, somebody should ask the question. So, okay, one observation you found and it says this, and therefore, like you figured out 5561 BC. No, it's like solving a jigsaw puzzle, right? Say, if you have a map of United States, each state you are putting it together. One state, like Illinois, you will put it anywhere, and it will fit when nothing else is there. But once you start putting everything else, then you know, which one is not fitting, which is extraneous. Like some state from India, another crossword puzzle has come into it, so you have to take it out, and so on. That's what I did. What I just showed you for Arundhati Vasishtha, just repeat that 300 times from different evidence pieces from Mahabharat, and it fits like a jigsaw puzzle, it fits like a crossword puzzle, and no matter where you start, no matter where you begin, it takes you to 5561 BC. Not only that, because Vyasadeva's evidence is such impeccable, that I was fortunate to even tell exactly the first day of the war, 16 October 5561 BC. Then of course you add 18 days, the last day of the war. Bhishma Nirvana Day, Bhishma's passing away, that is a 31st January 5560 BC. I mean, you could come up with all those dates. Same thing for Ramayana. I'll make the story simple. In Valmiki Ramayana, there are close to 600 references. One something I will tell you, at least for parental audience here. When do we celebrate Rama's birth? In Chaitra, everyone knows, Chaitra Shukla Navami, right? Usually it falls in when? April, month of April, March, April, somewhere there. And what is the season? Season is the spring. 21st, 23rd March is the middle of the spring, plus 30 days, so season is spring. Now, if you look at the descriptions of the month of spring, in Valmiki Ramayana, it talks about Chaitram Sri Manayam Masa Punya Pushpita Kanana. All the forests are blooming with flowers. Okay, now does that happen in spring? Yes. Okay, so what can you conclude? Remember, now you have to bring it together, Pratyaksha and Anumana. If you are not careful, what do you say? Ramayana is happening now. Ramayana happened just maybe a few hundred years ago. We know that that is not true. So that's my first toughest unsolved problem. I started with that Chaitra. The descriptions are such, but it can be today. It cannot be 1,000 years ago, it cannot be 2,000 years ago, because we know the other history pieces. So when I went backward and said, what is the first time when I can find the season in India, say northern India, UP and whatnot, which also can be described as where the forests are blooming with flowers. Then I said, well, the earliest possible one is the season of a Sharad. Again, if you look at the fall season here or in India, like September, October, after heavy rain, monsoon, again there are flowers everywhere. Our Dashahara time, Vijayadashmi time, we have flowers and so on. So that was my first thing. One clue led to another. Then something beautiful came up. I didn't even know that I was going to find it. But I found 6 references for the cardinal points, which is what? The winter solstice, summer solstice, fall equinox, spring equinox, given in Valmiki Ramayana. All 4 of them take you to 13 millennium BC, 14,000 years ago. Something more exciting. Ramayana describes the pole stars of Ramayana times. How many of you know that the pole stars also change? Everyone knows, by the way, I should start backward. How many of you know what is pole star? Okay, the one star that doesn't move when the earth is rotating around and so on. The pole star But the pole stars also move if you wait for thousands and thousands of years. And Ramayana describes exactly the pole star. Brahma Rashir Vishuddhasya Shuddhasya Paramarshya Archishmanta Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshinam. So all these again come together as a jigsaw puzzle to 12,209 BC. Now before I get back into question answer again quickly, but this is about when Mahabharata happened, when Ramayana happened. But children or all of us actually have another question. Many times when I used to tell with excitement, like, oh, I have done research on when did Mahabharata war happen, okay? And the skeptic Indian that is sitting in every one of us will say, yeah, that we might listen to you later on. But please tell me, like, did it really happen? And that's a genuine question, right? Did it really happen? My question is, how do you prove whether something happened or not? Any ideas, guys? The fresh ideas come from young brains. How do we prove that something happened? If I tell you, if I ask you, how many of you believe that Socrates, everyone has heard the name Socrates? Yeah? Okay, Socrates. How many of you believe that Socrates existed? Forget when, but did exist. Even both. Question not for children, everyone. Raise your hand. Socrates existed. Okay, if you don't raise a hand, I'm going to ask a question, guys, okay? Okay, all right. Okay, what about Jesus? Now some disagreements might begin. Actually, there is a book that Jesus may not have existed and so on, right? What about, I mean, the American kids do definitely study Benjamin Franklin, right? Everyone knows about Ben Franklin, the American hero, right? How many of you think Ben Franklin actually existed? Ah, very confident? Good. Okay, who wants to answer? What is the proof, guys? What is the evidence that Ben Franklin existed? I'm not challenging you, I just want to know. Because I studied in India. Yeah, please. Because there is a mention, correct? Very good. There is a mention of Ben Franklin in what? Books? Right. Okay, we can use the same law. I mean, this is for all of us. So somebody says, so, you know, guys, don't jump into it saying why Krishna existed, why Rama existed. Ask the question. Like, say, what about Ben Franklin? Like, and you will get answer, great answer. Congratulations. 5 brownie points. You came late, you know, but you get. Okay? Yeah, so it's mentioned somewhere. Now, what will be our answers once the person gives answers like that? Our answers about Krishna and Ram? Is mentioned in the books, okay? Right? But if people say, but yeah, Benjamin Franklin is, but I'm not so sure about Krishna or Rama, right? You hear that, right? Any other evidence for existence of Ben Franklin? His inventions, right? His inventions, anyone, you know, any particular one? Not light bulb. That was Thomas Edison, yeah. But something, no, she is actually on the right track, right? What he showed is that the lightning that happens in the sky and the electricity or the static that we feel, those are the same phenomenon, right? He did that kite experiment. Yeah, you heard about this, right? No, so yeah, that's correct. That started the light bulb research, right? So yeah, so it's there. So which means what? It's a mention somewhere. Did Ram or Krishna made any invention? Bhagavad Gita, so philosophical invention, yeah, Krishna made that. Anything else that Krishna made? Dwarka, very good, you know, and very strategic location, why he picked up that?
There are lots of debris and stuff on where Kurukshetra was supposed to be.
Sorry, on Kurukshetra?
There's lots of debris and stuff where Kurukshetra is supposed to be.
Okay, that's a good one, huh? Okay, so what he's saying is how many, so great point. He says there's lots of debris and stuff that you can find at Kurukshetra. Okay, where did you hear that, by the way?
Like many places.
Okay, yeah. No, that's a good one actually, right? Because see what happens now. So he has read it in many places. Now I will say, so thank you very much. Okay, you get 20 brownie points, okay? Yeah. Because he is bringing a moment of truth to all of us. How many of you have received, just similar to what the messages he received, how many of you have received in WhatsApp and Facebook and whatnot, a 38,000-year-old Vigraha? Be honest. I mean, I get this like 20 times and every time I have to delete. With that, Okay, 38,000-year-old Vigraha, and there is like a bronze statue, in the underwater or something. Yeah? So some of you. Not only I delete that, but whoever sends that to me, I either mute that person or block that person. Okay? Now you know what, guys? In our civilizational evidence, there is so much evidence that can be scientifically tested, like some of the examples I gave here. We do not need this kind of thing. Now what he's saying is, nothing about you because you're reading it. We have this wish, if such a big war happened where 4 million soldiers were dead in 18 days, there has to be some evidence there. Got to be some debris. If you read Mahabharata descriptions, you'll see why you won't find any debris. That's number one. You have to read Mahabharatas, the Sautik Parva and then the Stri Parva, to understand why you won't find much debris. And not much is found. We know the locations, but actually we have not found anything. Again, if you have the time, and somebody tell me when to stop. So what happens is people will ask me questions like this, and thank you, great one. It's a moment of truth for us. Many people will say, so Nilesh ji, actually, so at the Kurukshetra, we have found the evidence of nuclear, high nuclear activity there, And so does that mean, do you think that therefore Brahmastra was a nuclear missile? Now some of you are smiling, laughing. Why? There is a problem with this, right? You start premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, premise 4. This is the Nyaya Darshana again. Okay, if any one of this is wrong, the conclusion you draw from this evidence is also wrong. There is no nuclear activity at Kurukshetra. But just like that 38,000-year-old Vigraha, somebody starts it. It started bit of innocently, sometime as a feeling. But where is that coming from, guys? Satyena labhyas tapasa yeshatma samyak jnanena brahmacharya nityam. Antasharire jyotirmayohi shubhram yam pashyanti yataya kshina dosha. Our job is to minimize the error. Don't expect that we need to have answers to everything. What is exactly Brahmastra? We don't know. We can look at the description of Brahmastra. We know that the Pushpak Viman was there. We can say that with a confidence. But how did the engine look like? Now I sold G's aircraft engines, by the way, So usually I wing it in a different way sometime. I say, tell me what you know about the engine. But the point is, no, we don't know the engine. We don't know the fuel they used. But if you look at the Valmiki Ramayana descriptions of Pushpak Viman, it talks about how it became unstable due to the wind, how it used to make a noise, very loud noise when it used to take off. It did not land anywhere like a magical, Harry Potter's kind of something like this. It actually used to land outside the city every single time. So even when the Ravana came to snatch Sita, he didn't bring all the way his aeroplane next to the ashram. It is somewhere there. Then he gets on a chariot. That is his area. Khara Dushan, that is area under his control. Then he comes there. When the aeroplane finally, the Pushpak Viman brings Rama, Lakshman, everyone to Ayodhya, it's not right in front of the palace. It is outside, Nandigram. That's where it is landing. You will find these all descriptions. So we don't have to know all the answers. We will never know the answers. Like Sir Karl Popper says, while we may differ in little bits we know, I may know a little bit more about Ramayana, Mahabharata than some of you. That's possible. So while we differ in little bits that we know, when it comes to ultimate ignorance, we are all equal. Right? So we shouldn't feel the compulsion to create such things like this. So if there is another takeaway, that is, if you find such posts, please do not forward those. You investigate it yourself. Is this true? Some of them may be true. Go find the evidence, ask that question. Where is your evidence? Ask that question multiple times. Last one, and then if we have time, we'll do question answer or we can stop, which is this. If there is a third takeaway I want you to take away, multiplication table, everyone good at multiplication table? Okay, so my research, now you don't have to take it right now, just take it on the Shraddha, the conviction. Then you can read about my books, watch my videos and see if I'm right. Only when you are convinced, then you can accept it. Otherwise, you don't have to accept it. That is another Hindu principle of science. Unless you are convinced about something, don't do it. Okay? So, which is, I'll come to that. So one is this. So, if you want to simply remember our history, itihasa, it is this. if somebody asks you, assuming you are convinced, until then, just on a Shraddha, we had somebody and he said something, for now I believe that guy. Okay? If somebody asks you, when did the Mahabharata war happen? A simple way to explain that is more than 7,000 years ago. Can everyone remember that? More than 7,000 years ago. If somebody asks you, when did Ramayana happen? 12,209 BC, more than 14,000 years ago. So remember multiplication of 7 table, 7 times 1, 7,000 times 1, 7,000, 7 times 2 is a 14,000. And the other research that I did not discuss today, and I won't discuss it, we won't have a time for that, which is definitely some portions of Rig Veda are more than 21,000 years old. So 7,000, 14,000, 21,000. And somebody asks you, how old is your Indian civilization? What answers you give? If somebody asks, okay, how old is Indian civilization, Hindu civilization? What answers you give? And then I'm going to ask them. You might give a correct answer, they will give me the wrong answer. Oh, look, she gave a correct answer. 20,000? Yeah, 21,000. She got it, right? 7,000 years ago, Mahabharat, 14,000 Ramayana and this. What is the typical answers, the parents here? What is the typical answers you grew up with or you typically give to your colleague at workplace? Huh? 5,000, exactly. It's a lazy and tamasi number. There is no ground whatsoever for that number. Not because I am saying this Mahabharata. Even if I wouldn't have figured out when Mahabharata happened, when Ramayana happened, still there is no reason for this 5,000 number. So the third takeaway, this last one here, is remember the multiplication of 7,000. Mahabharata more than 7,000 years ago. Yeah, you can do that. Ramayana more than 14,000 years ago. And some portions of Rig Veda definitely more than 21,000 years ago. If somebody asks you how old is your civilization, you can kind of round it off. She did a great job there. 20,000, more than 20,000 years ago. Now the next thing they're going to ask is what? What's the next question they will ask? You, huh? Where is the evidence? Now what are you guys going to do? You say, oh, what will you do? Very good. Right? Yeah, read Nilesh's book, right? And if you have any questions, ask him. Right? Okay. On that, I will stop. Let's see if there are any time, and if we have any time for questions, we can do that. And you can tell me when to stop, by the way.
So Hari Om Nilesh. So you have talked a lot on the astronomical evidence from the Ramayana and Mahabharata. I'm asking, I've heard all your talks, but I'm asking on behalf of everybody. Now we are starting to see some archaeological proof, right? The Sanauli chariots, Indraprastha, we are seeing some Dwarka, definitely we are seeing some evidence. Can you educate the children especially on the archaeological evidence as well?
Okay, great question. And again, she's not asking because she has that question. She has watched my videos and we interact a lot, but for the benefit of the broader audience. How many of you have heard the name Galileo? Ah, good. Do you know what Galileo proved? Again, if you have made a revolutionary thing, it can be explained in a very simple way. If I have to simplify what Galileo did as a formula, mathematical formula, it is this. Galileo showed to the world, the Western world at least, celestial is equal to terrestrial. Whatever you see up is not any different than what you see here. So back to that question. So yes, most of my work that I did, the way I figured out these dates is using astronomy evidence from Mahabharata, astronomy evidence from Ramayana. Rig Veda was slightly different, but we will not go there. It was from the river evidence. But is there any evidence on the ground? Okay. Now she mentioned some of the things like people found a chariot there. Sanauli, like some of you would know. Okay, what is the good and bad of Sanauli chariot? They found a chariot, they found a sword, they found a bow and arrow, horse shape, the structure like that. So which means we knew chariots, we knew horses and so on and so forth. The good thing is that, and the dating of that is 4,000 years ago, which means India had chariots 4,000 years ago. That one we know, right? That's a good thing. What is the bad thing about it? Bad thing that happened after the Sanauli discovery. Just like remember he said he read many reports of lots of debris in Kurukshetra. Everywhere, if you have read this in online, wherever those form, Mahabharat war happened 2000 BC. How many of you have read that? after Sanauli news? No? Okay, you are like me, don't read the newspapers, which is good. All the newspapers were saying Mahabharat war was happening in 2000 BC. Do you know what's the problem? It's not a problem of Sanauli research, it's a problem of how to know or not know how to think properly. All that it says is there were chariots, there were some people who knew about chariots 2000 years ago. It does not say anything about Mahabharat war. Mahabharat war had chariots, Ramayana also had a chariot, so why just say that you suddenly find a chariot? So not that. But let me talk about what evidence we have found. Mahabharat text says the Krishna's Dwarka was flooded by the sea 36 years after the Mahabharat war. Anyone remembers the year of the Mahabharat war that I came up with? Anyone? Very good, thank you. 5561 BCE. BCE, before Common Era. Now if you add 36 to it, so after 36 years after 5561 BCE is what? It's a trick question. You don't add the number, right, before Common Era, you subtract the number, so 5525 BCE. Quickly to answer that question, so I started with this. After my astronomy, I said, well, what can I find on the ground? I found evidence from every corner of the world, significant, of a sudden sea level rise. Do you know, I'll mention some of the places. On the east coast of USA, Maine, in the middle of that particular millennium, okay, 6th millennium. Australia, the Great Barrier Reef. Caribbean, 7 different locations, Barbados and others, sudden 6.5 meter rise in 5525 BCE. On the east coast, Tamil Nadu, Pumpuhar, sudden sea water coming ingressing all the way to Mayuram, like 10-15 kilometers. Right now it's a land, but it came there and stayed there for a few thousand years before it going back to Pumpuhar. Okay, again exactly that during that time. That's evidence everywhere. But you must be asking, what happened at Dwarka, my friend? Actually, the evidence comes, this is not evidence, none of this, with a couple exception, evidence done by Indian researchers. Now, I'm saying this jokingly, if it's not Indian researchers, we tend to trust more, right? Yeah, if it's Indian researcher, well, I'm not sure. But, you know, just give some name, Einstein bagels, and we say, yeah, I trust that. So actually, sudden sea level rise of 15 plus meters, guys, meters, which is what? Almost 50 feet. Suddenly in the middle of 6 millennium BC, 5525 BC in Dwarka, that Gujarat area. So we have that evidence. Another evidence we have is from genetics. Now we have evidence from genetics. I think I'll mention that because that's something some of you may find fascinating, those of you who are familiar with Mahabharat. Everyone knows how many Akshohini warriors were there in the Mahabharat war? 18. Okay. Then do you know, if you take that, Akshohini is like a battalion, you know, the modern terms, like some kind of a unit. Mahabharata gives the descriptions. How many warriors? Anyone knows if you turn that 18 Akshohini into number of people who fought, what that number comes to? It comes to 4 million people. Guys, 4 million people fought together in a area of a 48. You know, this is the circumference, 48 miles is the circumference area, Kurukshetra. They fought for 18 days and majority of them were gone in 18 days. Okay, now I'm not going to make it complicated, but what happened is, now just imagine, suddenly a significant male population is gone. So all the children that are born afterwards, what they will have in terms of genetics? A small variation from the Y chromosome, can you relate to that? And much more variation in the X chromosome. Everyone reasonably familiar how the XX and XY and, you know, something like this. Now we also need some additional information. I'm going to quickly pull this here from Wikipedia. You know, you have seen the Sixth Sense, you know, that guy from MIT, like he pulls it like this and does that, something like this I'm going to do. If you look at the estimate of the population in 6 millennium BCE, on Wikipedia people have done this, it ranges from 5 to 20 million. Simplicity, I'm going to take 20 million because it is easy to make the point. So let's say the world population at that time is 20 million. For area of India, and everyone fought in the Mahabharat war, significant area by the way. It went from, if you think India now, you won't understand it. The people who fought in the Mahabharata war came as far as Syria. And we have evidence of that in the east all the way to Indonesia. Okay, that's the whole area. Let's take half of that world population, 10 million, was the population who was related to Mahabharata war. Now 10 million people, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Approximate answer is okay. How many men, how many women? 5 million and 5 million? Okay. Okay, 5 million and 5 million. If you give any different answer, that's a wrong answer and you thought too much. Okay, 5 million and 5 million. Now what did I tell you just now? In the Mahabharata war, 18 days, 4 million men were just gone in 18 days. Do you guys do the ratios? Yeah? Okay, so what is the male to female to male ratio at the end of the Mahabharata war in that area? 1:5, or female to male would be 5:1. Everyone with me? 5:1. Now pay attention. This happened when? 5561 BC, that's based on my information. Now, there was a paper published by Monica Carmine and a team, genetics paper, in 2015, which is what, 7 years ago, on genetics. What they found, they looked at the entire world data, and what they found is something fascinating. They found many other things, but this is the most fascinating thing out of that paper. They found there was a sudden imbalance into female to male ratio. Pay attention, just next 2 minutes and I'm done. Sudden female to male imbalance occurring somewhere in the world. I will not tell you where. And do you know what that ratio was? If you look at the absolute ratio, it was 16:1. But if you look at the relative ratio, like a signal to noise, those of you who understand, it was, listen carefully, 5:1. It was a 5:1. Okay, so female diversity 5, male diversity 1. What are the next 2 questions you must ask me after this? So ratio, I said the Mahabharata is giving us an estimate based on the population 5:1. Now what additional questions you need to ask? Where and when? Okay, brownie points, brownie points, brownie points, lots of brownie points. Yeah. So let me tell you where. If you have an earthquake, you ask immediately 3 questions. When did it happen? What is the epicenter? And the third question is, how intense it was. What is the Richter scale? Think of it like this. I already gave you the Richter scale. I said the imbalance ratio was 5:1. That's what Monica Carmine paper is saying. Where the epicenter was India. And the last question, when? You can take a guess. Tell me. 5561. Well, not 5561. Right, 7,500 years ago. Remember, that's what I said. That's the genetic evidence from 2015. There is no conspiracy going on between Monica Carmine, if you go and contact her, hey, tell me, have you heard Mahabharat? More than likely she says, no clue. So there is nothing like that. But actually that evidence is coming together. And there is a more and more evidence, physical anthropology. Professor Kennedy from Cornell University, he has done this work as far as back as 1970s. Do you know what he says? If there was any significant change in the Indian genetic makeup in the last 10,000 years, there were 2 instances. Another instance was around 800 BC, 500 BC, 200 BC, something like this, between 800 BC and 200 BC. And the other one was between 6,500 BC and 4,500 BC. And if you can see, 5561 is right in the middle. That is coming from physical anthropology, and you can just go on and on. The evidence comes. Anything you touch, you are going to find the evidence for that. Climatology, but I'll stop on that. Again, you need to look at my research. I told you a lot of benefits. You'll know more about Itihasa, but you'll also get a good night's sleep. What better things you want? Hari Om. Any questions, or we can stop?
If you have a few, 1 or 2 questions, we can take it, but otherwise we'll conclude. Oh, okay.
Hari Om. My name is Shivam. I'm a high schooler, and none of these high schoolers asked any questions, so I thought I should ask a question. Okay, so first off, I don't want to be rude in any way, but a lot of the things that you said, I'm super skeptical.
Skeptic.
Yes,
Yeah.
about, and I can't. You said the words astrology, evidence, a lot of these words. I've been going to mission for the past 12 years, and anytime we've really talked, or no, there's like the stories in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. It's like, as far as I know, we were taught that some of these stories were true, or maybe not even those stories in specific, but in all the books that we learned, some of the stories were true, but some of them are like exaggerated. But no matter what, they all teach you values, and that's what we're really taking away from Chinmaya mission. So you put in 15 years of work dedicating your research to trying to prove that all this happened in the first place. So my question is, were you religious or spiritual before, and did proving this help that, or did it really just prove that science has to prove religion and spirituality? Because I think science doesn't need to prove religion or spirituality.
Yeah, great question. I mean, a lot of great questions. Couple of points I'll quickly take. So he mentioned the super skeptic that, for example, he's feeling, and he may not be feeling, he may be just on behalf of a community of high schoolers might be putting that forward, which is great, thank you. So the Sanskrit word for that is a sanshay, being skeptic, okay, it's a sanshay. Now, sanshay is of a two kind. Again, this is a Hindu contribution to science, by the way. Sanshay, it can be sanshay of a mind, or it can be sanshay of a intellect. Sanshay of a mana, or sanshay of a buddhi. Krishna says, Adnyasya ashraddha dhanasya sanshayatma vinashyati. That sanshay Krishna is referring to is a sanshay of a mind. He says that will lead to destruction. And I'll tell you what the difference between the two is also. But on the other hand, if you go to Nyaya Darshana, that some of you, first part, you would have heard this, which is what? There are 16 elements you must learn. Pramana, Prameya, Sanshaya, Prayojana, Drishtanta, Siddhanta, Avayava, Tarka, Nirnaya, Vada, Hetva, Bhasa, Chala, Jati, Nirnaya. These are 16 elements. I'm just saying this to impress you now, because you're a skeptic there. We have to learn all of this to understand how to think properly. That second sanshay of a buddhi is what is required in science. That is what fascinated me to do this. Now, what is the difference? Say Pushpak Viman, like you would have heard about Ramayana story, right? So the first, the sanshay of a mind, the skepticism about the mind, I call it tamasic skepticism. How the way it works is somebody says, unless you show me Pushpak Viman and the fuselage and the engine and which fuel was and some diagrams of the aeroplane being made, since you cannot show that to me Mahabharat did not happen. I cannot believe, I cannot trust that Mahabharat happened. This is a sanshay of a mind because it's not logical. Just like you said very well that some of the stories could be true, other stories may not be true, even in the same grantha. That is very true. Okay? Now, what is the sanshaya of a buddhi? What is the skepticism, intellectual skepticism? Intellectual skepticism says, we came to know of aeroplanes, functional aeroplanes only in the last 150 years. Fair? People were experimenting hot balloons and everything, but the planes that we know. Pushpak Viman is being described into a Ramayana text. We don't know exactly how old, but definitely older than 400 years, 500 years, 1000 years or so. Let me go and read and see what else it says about Pushpak Viman. And your journey may begin. You may not ever find the fuselage, but you may find so much more that still your knowledge grows. That is the difference. What was the second one? Like, was it some spiritual thing that drove me, or it's the science, like I have to prove something using science before accepting something spiritual? The Indian definition, again from a Nyaya Darshana and some of the gurus that I learned from, I love it. One of my Facebook friend, I would say, but something just beautifully put it together. We work in a similar field in the corporate world. It is, we use Nyaya Darshana every day, And I used to, in GE, by the way, I used to use these words. I will say, so Pratipaksha Stapana, Vitanda. Write it down, something like this. So he describes it, and it's beautiful definition. The dichotomy that you see with the Abrahamic religions is simply not there in Hinduism. So a simple definition would be Adhyatma, his definition, my friend's definition. Adhyatma is a purification of a Vijnan or purification of science. And science is a purification of Adhyatma. Purification. I'll give you an example. You were there for a whole lecture today, right? No? No, okay. Like for example, I use Arundhati Vasishta. Were you here? No, then that will not help. So when I, just for the rest of the group here, When I said Arundhati Vasishta, what were people saying? Vyasadeva has written it, so Shabda Praman is there. It's a dharmic grantha, you can say religious grantha, Mahabharat, right? It's there. And so you are saying, science doesn't need to do this. No, if it's there, it is there. But somebody says, so show me. I mean, right now it's not. Okay? So, if you cannot figure this out, that did not stop anyone from learning the values of Mahabharata. They left it. I mean, Hindus can do that very well. They left it aside. But someone like me, I said, well, why would even Vyasa do that? It's curiosity, jidnyasa. I mean, if I had a time, I would have gone with that. It's like a Shraddha, Samshaya, Jidnyasa. It's a triangulation of those three too. Okay? So, what I thought, if Vyasa has said it, is there a way I can show it? This was not for anybody else's benefit, to prove anything. It was to prove to myself. And when I did it, by Bhagwan's grace, I could successfully do it. What does that do to me? What does that do to you? If somebody can successfully do something, our confidence, our Shraddha into our text goes up. Right? We say, well, yeah, this is another one that people thought for thousands of years this is impossible. Now that is true. So that's the reason I did it.
I'll have Deepaji give out.
Hari Om. Hari Om, everybody. Pranam Swamiji. Thanks, Nilesh ji, for this has been a long-awaited lecture. We have been wanting to have him here for a long time. He has, anyway, I hope this is just the beginning of all of your introduction to this huge space. He has many, many lectures on YouTube and obviously his books. So I would highly recommend all of you watch it. But just to take off what Nilesh ji talked about, the Saprayojana, right? What is the purpose? Why are we here to talk about when did Ramayana happen? What was the science? What was the history? Does it really matter if it was 7,000 years or 10,000 years? I think for us, especially at Chinmaya Mission, I'm speaking on behalf of all of us, it is really to have Shraddha in the words of our, every corpus of Hinduism, right? Whether it is the Vedas or the Puranas, Itihasas, is to develop a sense of Shraddha that whatever Rishi Valmiki or Vedavyasa ji have done, it should have truth. Otherwise, if we don't believe that some parts are untruthful, then how can we have Shraddha in, let's say, the Bhagavad Gita that we also study? So from that standpoint, again, Nilesh ji's thing is, it's not like you have to believe every sentence blindly and all of that, but it's to have a sense of Shraddha so we actually discover more. So I think along with studying the values, which is what we are here for, I think we should also have the Shraddha. They would not have said anything wrong, or they would not have said anything untruthful. It is to us to discover what they talked about, right? So from that standpoint, I think it is very, very valuable for all of us. And I think embark on a very, very scientific reasoning of what our Itihasa Puranas are talking about. Personally, I also want to call out, for the sake of the children and for all of us, few things about Nilesh ji that I really think we all should imbibe, right? Number one, he picked a small topic that had his passion, like he himself very modestly says, it just came to him. But take that one topic and really make it our mission. Like, obviously we all have jobs, we do like 9 to 5, we do things, but there is something that he has picked that has driven him, that's given him passion, that he is able to invest his whole self into and develop himself as part of it as well as contribute to the world, right? I think there is a lesson to be learned from that. We may not do what he is doing, we may do something else, but it's a matter of inspiration. Secondly, that he has also inspired so many people to do so, on Facebook. He has, because of him, hundreds of youngsters and hundreds of people are now embarking on serious study of Ramayana and Mahabharata. They are buying the Bori version, or they are doing some serious study. So that is one thing he has done by, just like Puja Gurudev, he has actually inspired so many people to embark on this study. And the third thing which I also want to say is, he is an embodiment of Tata Mana Apamanayo Tulya Nindastuti, because there are so many people who go and fight with him on Facebook. No, you're wrong, and no, you're doing that. And for everything, his answer is a very smiling, easygoing. He doesn't get into big arguments, or he doesn't put people down. He takes it very easily with a smiling face. He does his jobs and moves on. So I think there are many, many lessons to take from him for all of us. So I'm really happy that he came here and shared. I know it's a very intense session, and for some of us who are new to it, it might be a little of a stretch, but I highly recommend you all go and follow up on his work on YouTube as well as his books. Thanks a lot, Nilesh, and thanks, Akshohini ji, for joining us here. Thank you to Nishendu ji for arranging it this time. We have been talking about it, but finally he's here. And also thanks to everybody for coming. We have some visitors from outside as well, non-mission members, and thanks for coming and joining us here today. With that, I think we will conclude, Swamiji.
Hari Om, quick announcements before we do the concluding prayers. Please, everyone, make sure that you go down for lunch and give it justice, because if you walk away, we have to throw away the food. So everybody is invited to have prasadam downstairs. The most immediate, our program is the blood drive, which is on 6/19 from 9 to 1. We have a very few enrollment this year. We need 20 people. We have only 8 to 9. So please register online. Mahesh ji is also here. You can contact him. It's very, very important. It's a noble cause. And we have been doing it for the last 20 years, twice a year. So please support the blood drive and register yourself. One important thing about blood drive is that you shouldn't have gone to, if you've gone to India within the last 1 year, you are not eligible for the blood donation. So that's the only restrictions you have. So please enroll yourself. Second most important program we have is our graduation on June 12th, and it will be in the shrine. There won't be any study class, so everybody will join here, and the children at the younger age group will join later on in the program. It's our children who graduate from here in the 12th grade. It's a very auspicious program. We have a very well-known chief guest. Our Swami Sarvasananji is also going to be our chief guest. So please come with your friends for the graduation program. And then lastly, we also have this year, like Yamunotri has it, is our Chinmaya Mission Chicago Badri camp, which is going to be July 23 to July 28. And it's already on the website. You can register. And the theme is Dharmarath, Chariot of Success is our topic. And we'll be giving you much more information for the camp within next coming week. But you will have the flyer coming to you, and the registration is already on there. So you can register yourself from KG class or a Shishu Vihar to 12th grade. So that's the whole program. We'll conclude with short prayers, pledge, and Aarti. Sarve Bhavantu.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaः, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Asato Ma Satkamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadaः Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Please stand up for Bhajan Aarti. We stand as one family, bound to each other with love and respect. beliefs and false values, within and without us. We live honestly, the noble life of sacrifice and service, producing more than what we consume and giving more than what we take. We seek the Lord's grace to keep us in the path of virtue, courage, and may thy grace and blessing flow through us to the world around us. We believe that the service of our country is the service of the Lord of Lords, and devotion to the people is a devotion to the Supreme Self. We know our responsibilities. Give us the courage. Om Tat Sat. आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की दिव्य रूप मूर्ति करुणा की आरती सद्गुरु की चरणों में उनके शांति समाये शरणागत की भ्रांति मिटाये पाप ताप संताप हरण की आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की आरती सद्गुरु की वेद उपनिषद गीता को गाया धर्म सनातन फिर से जगाया शुद्ध नीति प्रीति शंकर की आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की आरती सद्गुरु की सिद्धबाड़ी की तपोभूमि में नित्य विराजे गुरु हमारे भक्त हृदयानंद श्रोत की आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की आरती सद्गुरु की आरती सद्गुरु की ॐ न तत्र सूर्यो भाति न चन्द्र तारकं नेमा विद्युतो भान्ति कुटोऽयमग्निः तमेव भान्तमनुभाति सर्वं तस्य भासा सर्वमिदं विभाति ॐ नारायणाय विद्महे वासुदेवाय धीमहि तन्नो विष्णुः प्रचोदयात् ॐ महादेव्यै च विद्महे विष्णुपत्नी च धीमहि तन्नो लक्ष्मीः प्रचोदयात्